Now in this first session, we'll strive to conceptualize that resilience and talk about what it means to build those companies. What does it take to build resilient businesses in these globalized geopolitical times? And can we keep on doing what we've done over the past several decades, or do we need a new kind of approach? And what do we even mean when we talk about resilience? Big questions, big issues, and in order to tackle those, we have divided this session into two parts. First, we'll begin with two highly acclaimed academics and with a slightly more theoretical perspective, and then we'll invite three business leaders to join the discussion and have a little bit more focus on that business side of things. And at the very end, if we have time before the lunch break, we can have maybe take one or two questions from the floor as well, so keep that in mind. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our first two panelists. Please give a warm welcome to a leading expert in the Foresight and Strategy Unit of the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, Mr. Timo Hämäläinen. Timo has studied transformation of the world economy and advanced societies since the early 90s, and he's very well known for his broad and systemic views on future challenges. Also pleased to welcome Rector of Hanken School of Economics in Helsinki, Mr. Ingmar Björkman. Welcome. Previously, Ingmar has worked as Dean and Professor at Aalto University School of Business, and in his research he has focused on people management of international organizations. So, gentlemen, let's begin with the very basics. How do we define resilience? Ingmar, what is resilience?
Well, resilience basically is how do you react to, bounce back from, and lay the foundation for the future when facing really adverse situations. Resilience in itself is not a new term, although it is a little bit of a buzzword these days. We can go back decades, and there was a lot of research on children, adults, how did they react when they faced the death of close ones, divorces, war, and so on. But now this has been taken up to first an organizational level and now increasingly also a national level. But obviously these levels relate to each other, and that's perhaps something we can come back to later on.
And in this context, it's important to remember that resilience is not only a fixed single entity, it has many dimensions, different types. Timo, what do we need to understand of these different types of resilience?
Yes, I guess what Ingmar was describing was this traditional way of thinking about resilience, which is bouncing back from the disruptions and crises. But one can also think about resilience as giving an opportunity for transforming one's business or organizational arrangements and ways of doing things. And one could call that futures resilience or transformative resilience. And I think that in the current environment of rapid change and increasing complexity and uncertainty, this type of resilience is becoming increasingly important, not only because we have to transform our organizations to be more sustainable for the future.
You've talked about restorative, adaptive, and transformative resilience. So is transformative better than the other types of resilience at this moment in time?
I think we need both the ability to maintain our current activities, but at the same time we need to build this kind of transformative resilience because the operating environment is changing so rapidly that we cannot stay put. We have to face the new challenges, and we have to even anticipate the future challenges.
And Timo has claimed that we live in the middle of a general governance crisis, which means that our post-World War II organizations, our social institutions, our long-term planning, etc., it doesn't work anymore. The basic design of our society is simply not resilient anymore. Ingmar, how do you feel about this pretty bold statement?
Well, obviously, we as scholars need to come with bold statements for there to be reactions. But I think the point here is that if you think of the society we live in today as a part of a global economy which is facing all these challenges, we need to have structures in place at the country level and also at the organizational level both in terms of foresight, in terms of building the scenarios that were discussed here, and in building our capacity to react to them.
So
then
are the
we
structures
are back
old-fashioned?
to Timo's point about how can you use situations like this, put a positive twist on them, which also actually helps organizations deal with the adversity in question. So you can react by trying to strengthen the existing way to operate, or you can react by coming up with positive aspects to it. And that actually energizes also the organization in question.
So if the structures are kind of old-fashioned, if we stick to that sort of societal level, that 3,000-foot viewpoint, what do we need to do in order to strengthen the resilience of our societies, Nordic and Baltic, Timo?
I think the main thrust is that we need to increase the diversity of our thinking and the alternatives of our practical operations. We need to be ready for surprising events, and therefore we need more capabilities to act in different kinds of situations. And that has to do with our mental frames and our ways of seeing the world. We need to have diversity in our thinking, but also have various alternatives in terms of practical operations. We need to have different kinds of options, no matter what comes.
What kinds of tools would you emphasize, Ingmar?
I would also argue that we need diversity in terms of people. There is a big debate in Finland now ahead of the elections on Sunday about Finland needing more people from different backgrounds. And I certainly think that this is one of the key issues when it comes to the resilience of Finland as a country. We need to put in place the structures, but also the change of mindset that allows us to be competitive in an international market for talent, not only to attract people, but to integrate them and make them feel as important parts of society, which would then also strengthen the social cohesion of society.
So in order to have a resilient society, we need to have resilient individuals. So in that vein, what's the role of the university sector that you represent here?
Well, obviously the university sector represents many pieces of the big puzzle that we are discussing today. One being that the universities are responsible for providing the basic, obviously, knowledge level, competence level of the society. We talk a lot about the innovativeness of society, but unless we have people who are actually doing this, unless we focus enough on building those or training those masters, those PhDs and so on, we will not be successful in terms of how we react to the adverse conditions that we are facing.
Timo.
I would like to perhaps add one dimension to our discussion of future competencies, or the competencies that we need in today's world. And that is that we tend to talk about reskilling our workforce, which means that when the old skills become outdated, we need to offer opportunities for building new skills. But there's research from developmental psychologists which suggests that we also need to broaden our mindsets. They call this challenge as a vertical growth challenge. It means that besides building new skills, we also need to facilitate individual growth, also in adulthood, not only in our education system. And some of the big companies in globally, and also some consultancies are now working on this challenge and trying to help organizations to broaden the mindsets of their employees and management. And that's I think, a new challenge that we have to discuss.
So that's the so-called lifelong learning, which is crucial for resilience as well. I would like to come back, before we invite our business leaders on stage, to one of the things that Mr. Tuomas Aarenkiel pointed out in his keynote, and I know that Timo has also talked about. It's kind of the trade-off between efficiency and resilience. They are in some way like polar opposites. So Ingmar, would you say that we need to be a little bit less efficient in order to be more resilient?
The problem with a focus on efficiency is that you don't have the slack, you don't have the capacity to react. The China +1 strategy, the nearshoring, for instance, addresses the issue that if you're too dependent on on one location, the factory of the world. If something happens, it influences your operations globally. If you don't have the financial resources to bounce back when you're facing short-term adverse conditions in the markets, if you don't have people with different background, not necessarily only those competences that you need today, you are not in a good position going forward after having tackled that short-term crisis.
Timo, how do you feel about that?
Yes, I think we've focused on, as Thomas suggested, on this efficiency maximization for maybe 2 or 3 decades already. And we've seen the results now when we've neglected resilience to a certain extent in these past crises. And now I think it's obvious to all of us that we need more resilience, but I guess the next question is that how should we build that resilience? What does it require? And I would argue that the whole society actually needs that kind of rethinking. For example, in Finland, I think our whole socioeconomic model was built on increasing efficiency and productivity, and it's still important, but we need to add resilience now to this policy discussion.
Ingmar.
And then if you link this back again to corporations, we need resilient leaders. There was one of the great patriarchs of Finland, Ville Valfors, who was the CEO of Wärtsilä for 35 years. He apparently had a saying that "hahaneetti no go skit" was the question. And what's the point here? Well, when appointing people to central positions, you look at whether or not they have gone through hardship. Have they been able to make sense of the situations? Have they learned from it? And are they able also to get support from others that you need? If we don't have resilient leaders leading our organizations, it will be hard for these organizations to be resilient in themselves. It's not the only aspect, but it is one important one.
That was a great lead-in for us to bring in some resilient leaders with business insight, with experience, expertise. So we're happy to welcome 3 seasoned and highly appreciated business leaders. Ladies first, dear audience, please join me in welcoming CEO and Chairman of the Management Board of Ekspress Grupp, Ms. Mari-Liis Rüütsalu. Also, please welcome on stage Mr. Ilkka Kivimäki. Ilkka is a founding partner at the venture capital company Maki.vc, and I guess the best way to describe him is that he does everything serial, founding growth stories and backing up prominent startups. Quite a track record in the startup scene, and Ekspress Grupp, that's the biggest media enterprise in the Baltics and one of the leading global innovators in the field. And our 5th panelist comes from one of the leading global consulting companies, McKinsey. He has a long and impressive career in business. Previously, he has worked at Microsoft and Nokia, so happy to welcome Managing Partner Finland and Baltics at McKinsey, Mr. Kari Kulojärvi. So we just agreed that resilient businesses are hugely important for societies, but I guess the big question for you is how resilient are our Nordic and Baltic companies? Kari, from scale 1 to 10, how resilient are we?
Well, that's a tough question. To give a quick answer like that, I would say 7 to 8.
7 to 8?
Yeah.
Well, a little bit of reasoning behind that.
When we work with our clients, we typically look at resiliency in a rather pragmatic way across roughly 6 dimensions. Those dimensions range from kind of commercial resiliency, pricing, for example, to organizational resiliency, your people, from supply chain resiliency to different strategic topics, for example. And when we look kind of the clients we work, they're still in pretty good shape. I think we all are exposed to global supply chain related risks, like was discussed already. A lot of companies are taking actually actions on their organizational health. They're taking actions on on how they manage their commercials, what is their interest rate exposure. But obviously, none of us are perfect alone.
And what about Mari-Liis? What grade would you give to companies, Nordic and Baltic ones?
If you ask that question from the previous speaker, then also something like 7-ish, I think so. At least on the Baltic level, you know, the companies are quite small to compare with the Nordics. And I think that this lean management system, what they have in there, it somehow also already is quite efficient, and also quick decisions and quick action plans. So that's why I think that they are more or less ready for this kind of like new approach of constant change. And from our perspective, you know, we're a media company, which means that absolutely every day is unexpected for us. So nobody from the editorial teams comes in the morning and starts. I know
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, and you will not start what you finished yesterday at 5 o'clock. So there are new topics absolutely every day, and you don't know what's coming. So I think that in our case, it's already in our DNA.
So, Kari, Ilkka, is there a difference between the resilience of different kinds of companies, big corporations, SMEs, startups?
Well, I think that that's exactly the key then. And I think that in general in the Nordics, people have to look into different countries and need to kind of understand what's going around. So I think that in general it's really good. But then kind of if going into the small end, in general you could say that the startup resilience is very low because most of the startups fail. But those ones that survive, they have actually are 10 out of 10 because then you have the right team that understands in which market they work and can solve the problems on the fly that are, well, the startup life is only about the problem solving every day, like 24/7. So in that sense, the best companies really are the machines that are making the change.
You're going with 10? Is
I'm
that your
going
score?
10 out of 10 for those startups that are getting into the scaling phase.
That's very good. Let's bring some more challenges. Thomas pointed out the role of and the risk of China. Kari, is China a resilience risk? Should we go with the US and cut our ties to China?
Well, perhaps the way I would answer this, I don't want to go really deep into geopolitics, not the best expert there for sure. But personally, I have been involved in building China-based supply chains for the last 20 years. Many of us are, if we are honest. It has taken decades. Unwinding that won't happen very fast. It takes years, if not decades, if you've seen what has taken place there. So no matter what, and I think it was said even, there are activities, China Plus One, and other good initiatives. Those won't remove our China supply chain risk anytime soon. Well, so it's something we need to live with.
Yeah, okay. So if it's I can understand that perfectly. It's so hard to sort of reroute those supply chains. But the key question here is how should and how can companies build their resilience in these turbulent times? Kari, and we can get our academics as well.
Ilkka.
Oh, sorry, Ilkka. You look so alike. Sorry. Handsome men both.
Yeah, I think that for most of if really looking from the startup perspective, when companies are building their supply chains, it's really easy that you can do the different models there and kind of avoid just standing on one foot. In general, I think that it was first time 4 years ago, really started to think about this geopolitics when we invested into the IQM, into the quantum computers, which was actually from the day one you were talking about that, okay, what are the things that we can sell out to China, and okay, can we even get the components from US that are needed, because officially there was no bans, but in practice some of the academics were forbidden to send any material to Europe. And that was kind of opening the eyes, at least for me, for good that, okay, in every company you need to be thinking from day one that, okay, how do we position in the global theater?
What about Ingmar? What would you say to the companies?
Well, I'm back to what already has been discussed to some extent here. What are the different scenarios, and within those, how would your company be influenced? And of course, that depends on the industry, it depends on the company in terms of the value chains that you have put in place. But thinking about even the black swans, the unlikely events, and how they would possibly impact negatively on our operations is important. So the China plus one, at least from a theoretical perspective, makes lots of sense.
Timo.
Yes, I would emphasize two things. One is this, which Ingmar was referring to, which is the increasing the cognitive diversity in the organization, i.e. the different ways of thinking and also different kinds of employees. And the other is to increase the number of organizational alternatives and strategic alternatives which you can implement if something surprising happens. But you need both. If you don't have enough thinking diversity, you don't recognize the new opportunities and threats. But that's not enough if you don't have the operational capability to do different things and not the one that you're doing.
So how do these, Mari-Liis, how do these ideas apply to the media industry?
Yes, from the resilience point of view, we have had very good practice, like with the COVID, of course, then now with the war, and we have been trained very well from that side. And our responsibility towards the society is also a little bit different, covering the topics. And it has been, like in COVID times, we learned how to digitalize our business in a very fast pace. At the moment, we already have 80% of our revenues digital. So, and COVID helped. We had like this COVID pump, like it was a couple of years ago, the Trump pump for the New York Times. And this helped us to digitalize our business very fast. So we saw an opportunity in there, even though that in the beginning we saw that all the revenues were declining, what happened in the COVID times. And we invested heavily in our technology and also in our content, which made us stronger and which also we strengthened our position in every market we operate. So that was like, from looking back, it was like beneficial for us.
COVID was, of course, a huge crisis, but we are right now living in the middle of all kinds of crises: geopolitical crisis, governance, climate change, debt, inflation, and so on and so forth. So Kari, now how do we turn a crisis into an opportunity?
Well, we have actually done a lot of research on this topic, and research shows it's actually pretty clear that the companies who keep investing into their future during crises like this or events like this, and don't just focus on cost cutting, but make sure that they place their strategic bets and invest on those, will actually come out from cycles like this much stronger. And when you think about it, it's pretty obvious. And the research also shows that those companies will benefit from the actions they took during times like this for years to come when compared to their competition.
What if you don't have resources to invest?
I think the job for the management of the company always is to make trade-offs to make sure that the resources are where they are needed for the future, but I understand that there are practical challenges sometimes.
Ilkka, any words of advice for business leaders in these difficult times?
Well, I think that first of all, I think that the venture capital is exactly what we are talking, that we are always kind of looking for the crisis and opportunities, and I think that's really the key, that when there is any crisis, there is always opening the opportunities. And now looking at all of the biggest, like the food, textile industry, logistics, even primary energy, which was looking from our point of view, that building new companies into the primary energy side, if somebody would have been saying 5 years ago that not going to happen that the minimum ticket is 100 million. Well, now there is lots of doors open and lots of small companies and mid-sized companies that are actually entering those markets because of these crises and changes.
Kari.
Actually, I would like to go shortly back to the discussion you had before us around kind of being efficient or efficient being a trade-off to resiliency. If I may challenge that a bit, one could say actually that being efficient, it has plenty of good attributes for resiliency as well, because efficiency to me isn't just having lowest cost supply chain or something like that. Like being efficient means that you're typically, hopefully flexible, fast to react, profitable is good for resiliency because you have more room to maneuver, going back to the discussion we just had. So there are plenty of good attributes being efficient.
So it depends on how you define
efficiency.
Timo, how would you reply to this?
And also, I guess whether you are at the frontier of efficiency and resilience. I mean, if you have unnecessary inefficiencies in your organization, and so it's clear that you can improve efficiency without sacrificing resilience, and vice versa. But if you're right at the sort of frontier between these two, it might become a real issue, especially if you only maximize efficiency and pay no attention to resilience.
Ingmar.
At the risk of sounding too academic here, I think there is a distinction that we need to make between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency, you work within, you optimize within the boundaries. Effectiveness, you do the right things. And if you talk about effectiveness, then I agree. Efficiency has the problem if you optimize too tightly around a certain way to operate, then it becomes not very flexible. And also if it's too tightly linked, the risk of problems somewhere in the organization will lead to huge problems elsewhere. These are insights that are decades old, but I think they really hold when we talk about resilience.
This is why we have academics on the panel. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, go ahead. In the beginning, I promised that I might squeeze in one or two questions from the floor. We have there one, so please use the mic and press the button on there in the middle, and when you see the red light, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, JP. I'm Jussi Seppälä, CEO of Strategic Communications, Hopeasepät. Thanks for the excellent discussion. Naturally, every company has a unique situation of its own, which we need to look at, but thinking about trends that affect us all, AI, for example, comes strongly to mind. Everybody's talking about GPT-4 and so forth. I guess Timo might have an opinion about how AI might affect, for example, transformative resilience, but can you foresee some even more strategic level implications? Thank you.
Thank you very much for a great question. Timo, would you like to?
Oh, this is a tough one. I must admit, I'm not an expert in AI, so I would pass on the baton to somebody else on the panel if you have ideas.
That's something we use in the media business quite a lot, Mari-Liis.
I'm not also an expert to AI, but yes, this is a very big question in the air at the moment. There are all the platforms are rushing out with their AI into the public at the moment. And there has been a question reason, which is very good that it is there, that why are we rushing? What are the benefits of the platforms, what have been already released, and what is the danger behind that? Nobody has talked about the ethics. Nobody has talked, okay, there are already some talks about that. And also about, when you use those tools, we have been talking now for 10 years and teaching people how to be critical about the sources where you get your information. But at the moment, from the AI platforms, you don't even get the sources or the links to the information. So you have to double check that anyway. And of course, there will come all the other problems with the rights of the information used and everything. So it's a very big topic.
Let's get Ilkka's and Kari's 2 cents, Ilkka.
Yeah, I think that it's exactly that. It's a crazily big topic that is relevant for everyone, but I think that really we have seen the first 0.5% of the change, that nothing has happened yet, and that's why I think that now it's maybe too early, but for most people, very good time to think that, okay, what could it be for us? And I think that when looking 10 years ahead from now and looking back, I think that now it would have been a time to do the really crazily good decisions and kind of understand how it works, because I think that it's just there is so many opportunities around it. And
Kari, just in a nutshell.
So we have talked a lot about scenarios as part of managing resilience, like scenarios from kind of macro scenarios and go all the way down to your inventory management scenarios and everything in between. I think AI will help a lot. Like it will help to build scenarios in various different kind of scenarios, because AI fundamentally is an analytical tool that processes huge amounts of data, and kind of used right, it can really help in resilience planning.
So thank you for a great question, and I don't want to steal too much time from your lunch break, so let me ask our panelists one final question, and that's simply, if you could leave us with one single thought today regarding our topic, what would it be, Ingmar?
Use adverse situations to come up with something positive. ChatGPT in universities, killing universities because we cannot ask students to write essays or to have that kind of exams, or use it to your advantage. Ask them to do it and then criticize the answers. So bring twist it to something positive.
Mari-Liis, your final thought on resilience.
It was a very good thought, that use the situations to make you stronger. So always make a decision what not to do, and then afterwards what to do with the decisions and also with the situation of the crisis where you are at the moment.
That balance between fast thinking and not panicking, that's a good one. Ilkka.
Well, first I thought that I would say that every change is an opportunity, but I think that we said it already, so then I need to say now that the startups are saving the world.
That's a great one-liner. We like that, yeah, good. And Kari?
Well, we didn't really have time to talk about people too much, so perhaps that would be my closing thought, because in the end, we are managing resiliency, and there is a lot of anxiety and other feelings. So while doing all the other strategic actions, I think we need to focus on our mental health and making sure that our employees and organizations are doing well.
Very valuable point. And finally, Timo.
Yeah. I think we have all now realized that we need this resilience in the future. The next challenge is to understand how to develop it in our organizations and in our society.
Dear panelists, thank you very much for a great discussion and sharing us your expertise, your insight, your experiences. We really appreciate that. So let's give them a big round of applause, shall we?